We have been in the census for a while now. Back before the pandemic, Census Day was April 1st, and it was actually slated to wrap up by the end of July. But because of the pandemic, the Census Bureau has extended their counting timeline. So now we are still trying to encourage everyone to respond. It is not too late to make sure that you're included in the decennial count. Starting next week, census takers will be knocking on people's doors. So they're going to be going around the Bay Area to households that have not yet responded to the census and knocking on their door and collecting their responses in person. The SF Bay Area has the highest self-response rates in the state of California. We are at over 70%. About 4 out of our 7 counties here have actually exceeded the response rate of the census compared to 2010, which is really fantastic. But for our most vulnerable communities, who are also the hardest to count and hardest hit by the pandemic, on average, the response rate's looking more like 60%. In places like in East and West Oakland, it's 50%. San Francisco, downtown San Jose, we're looking at 40% response to the census that has been running for a couple of months at this point. So our most vulnerable households are currently in dire risk of being left out of the census count and, as a result, experiencing further marginalization from being underfunded and underrepresented over the next decade. So we can't emphasize enough how important it is to really take advantage of these final few weeks of the census and make sure you're included in that count. Because while we're doing well as a whole in the Bay Area, an undercount in one community and one neighborhood is an undercount for all of us. So a couple of things to know about the door knocking operation. First of all, it is Census Bureau employees. They are sworn to protect your confidentiality of your data, and they're only going to be asking you questions that are on the census. So nothing about your social security number, no bank account numbers, credit card numbers. It's really your name, your age, race, ethnicity, numbers that are used ultimately to distribute power and representation over the next 10 years. Census workers will have badges from the Department of Commerce. They'll have a watermark, their photo and expiration date, and their vehicles will also have an official business sign. So it should be really clear that it's a census worker. They, of course, will be maintaining social distancing to ensure your safety and their safety. They'll have masks. They'll have hand sanitizer. So we're hoping that no one, will be concerned about them coming to their door. But if you are still concerned, you could definitely at any point still take the census on your own, whether it's online or over the phone or via a paper form that's been mailed to you. The census is one of the most underrated democratic processes in this country. You can tie basically anything back to the census. When we talk about how power is distributed, when we're thinking about who's representing us, who is writing the policies and laws that then impact our communities, that is ultimately based on the census count. When you're talking about how funding is distributed to fund schools and free lunches and SNAP, healthcare, clinics, all of that is determined in part by the census count. So especially in this current moment, because of the pandemic, knowing that we will be relying on federal resources for recovery, we'll be relying on lots of public health research that'll be happening. All of that is going to be based on the census count. And when we're thinking about the racial reckoning that is happening in our country right now, so much of this is in part due to generations of underrepresentation for our hard to count communities. So it is so much more relevant than ever to make sure that we're counted and we're not left out, because every single person has a right to be counted in the census. It's in the Constitution, it's in the 14th Amendment, and it is protected by extremely strong laws. At no point can anyone, including the president, change the confidentiality of the census. They could never ask you about your citizenship or immigration status. It is really in our best interest to get counted.